welcome into Texans today, and the wait is finally over. We have the Texans 53-man roster, the initial 53-man roster, and emphasis on initial because I don't think the Texans are anywhere near close to finalizing this roster. I think a lot of moves will still be coming in this week and next week leading in to week 1 up against the LA Rams. And that's why you gotta hit that noti bell. Step 1, obviously, gotta subscribe. Number 2, click the notification bell and then select the all option. When news happens, when news breaks, we break it down here on Texans Today all throughout the season. So no matter when, no matter where, we got you covered with the latest Texans news. Make sure to 1, hit that subscribe button, and 2, click that noti bell. So let's start off today's video with actually talking about the IR/PUP list for the Texans. These guys will be either remaining on the IR for the remainder of the season or possibly returning at some point. We know Joe Mixon, he can return after the first 4 games. Jalen Reed, he was also put on the IR/PUP list. Kurt Hinish, DeMeco Autry, Tank Dell, Irv Smith Jr. to highlight some Texans injuries as we go through this Texans initial 53-man roster. Just keep those in mind with, some tinkering that this Texans team can still do with that roster throughout the year. All right, let's start with quarterback on the initial 53-man roster, and this one shocked everyone around Texans Twitter. Graham Mertz making the initial 53-man roster for this Texans team. And my one question is, did the Texans really think another team was going to put in a waiver claim for Graham Mertz? Was he that talented or that showed that amount of skill throughout training camp, preseason, to where they were worried about other teams stealing Graham Mertz from them? That's an interesting one. I personally would not have wasted a roster spot on Graham Mertz. That's just me, though. That's just me. I would have maybe, kept another tight end. We'll get to that later on in today's program, but these are your quarterbacks on the initial 53-man roster. Let's go to running back I'll say fullback, because British Brooks, the second-year UDFA out of North Carolina, makes the initial 53-man. Again, a great story, a great feel-good story if you're a Texans fan. Somebody easy to root on. We usually have those guys in special teams and, aren't star players, but, capture the hearts of Texans fans. That is British Brooks. Really happy for him for making the initial 53. Obviously, as I mentioned, Joe Mixon can return after the first 4 weeks, but Nick Chubb, Dameon Pierce, Ogunbowale, Woody Marks round out this running back room. And as we wait for Joe Mixon to return after the first 4 games, I actually tweeted out at Jeremy Chugs. You can follow me on X. I don't believe Mixon returns until week 7 because the Texans have a bye week, week 6. They play the Ravens in week 5, a very tough first game to return to. If you're asking me, the Texans, they go conservative every time whenever it comes to player injuries. So, in my mind, I don't expect to see Mixon until week 7 after the Texans' bye week because I don't think they'll try to make him rush him to return to play at Baltimore in his first game back during this regular season. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they trot him out there in week 5, but I would put my money on Mixon returning week 7 after the Texans' bye week. And that gets me to this. We'll talk about our sponsor, PrizePicks, later on in today's program. But in the spirit of PrizePicks, we go in more or less 505 rushing yards for Nick Chubb. I think he's going to go more. If you agree with me, if you think Nick Chubb's going to go more than 505 rush yards, give me a yes in the comment section. If you think it's going to be less, give me a no. Let me know down in the comment section. I'm going yes. I think Nick Chubb can, in fact, go more than 500 rushing yards. I think, especially through these first 5 weeks of the regular season, Nick Chubb is going to turn it on and show everybody why he was once one of the best running backs in the entire National Football League. All right, let's move over to the wide receiver room. Texans, we thought they might, and they actually did it. They kept 7 wide receivers on the roster, obviously traded away John Mechie to the Philadelphia Eagles, but they kept Justin Watson and Braxton Berrios. Those were the 2 guys that said if they cut a wide receiver and keep 6, one of those 2 guys, the Texans ended up saying, hey, we would rather keep 7 wide receivers on our roster: Nico Collins, Christian Kirk, Jaden Higgins, Jalen Noel. And I just wonder, did the Texans feel kind of burned from last year with all the wide receiver injuries they had. You got to remember, going into last year, everybody thought the Texans were going to have the number one wide receiver room in the NFL, including this guy, Nico Collins, Stephon Diggs, Tank Dell, all getting hurt throughout the regular season last year, leaving the receiver room very thin. I wonder if DeMeco Ryans, Nick Caserio sat together and said, hey, listen, I'd rather keep more wide receivers on this roster, make sure we have a good unit, a well-rounded unit, and maybe that's why they keep 7 on the initial 53. This was the biggest head-scratcher for me. I would have rather the Texans kept 2 quarterbacks and 3 tight ends, but the Texans zagged when everybody expected them to zig. Dalton Schultz and Cade Stover, the only 2 tight ends that make the initial 53-man roster. As I mentioned, Irv Smith Jr. on that IR/PUP list, eligible to return at some point this season. Maybe they go ahead and look at him to, come back and be the tight end 3. Maybe they like British Brooks moving him around as that extra tight end on the roster / running back. In an offense that, is going to use the tight end a lot. Nick Cayley loves himself some tight ends. It just really shocked me that they only kept 2 on the roster. In all my projections, I had them keeping 3, maybe 4. I did not see them keeping only 2 tight ends on the roster, but that's why I mentioned it's the initial one. A lot of moves could be made in this coming week. Let's go to the offensive line where they kept 9 guys, and I put out a video this morning. Cam Robinson still on the roster, but that doesn't mean he'll be on the roster come week 1. I think a trade is still viable via Cam Robinson and the starters. I think the left side of the screen right there, that's your starting unit. Ursary, Tomlinson, Andrews, Ingram, and Howard. Then you have Blake Fisher as a backup tackle, Cam Robinson, Juice Scruggs, Jarrett Patterson, the Texans keeping 9 linemen. And they did keep us on our feet because they did make a trade on the offensive line. It was Austin Deculus. I did not see that one coming either. Trading him to the LA Chargers for a conditional 7th-round pick. The condition probably has to do with him playing a certain amount of games, this, that, or the other. But the Texans sending away Austin Deculus for a pick. Nick Caserio works some more wizardry, a guy who they were almost surely going to cut. End up getting a draft pick for him. Now, I'm going to break down the defensive 53-man, but before I tell you who made the 53-man roster on the defensive side of the football, today's show is brought to you by our friends over at PrizePicks. And football, it is so freaking back. And the best way to watch football, the most exciting way, is with our friends over at PrizePicks. It's daily fantasy sports made easy. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. As I mentioned, football, we are so back. In college football, back this weekend. PrizePicks is the best way to get action on sports in more than 40 states, including California, Texas, Florida, and Georgia. And if you're wondering, well, Jeremy, what's a good example of, a lineup that I might want to, put out there? This is the one that we have been cooking up here at the Chat Sports office. Arch Manning, a demon pick, which means get some more money, more on 0.5 rushing or receiving touchdowns. And then Garrett Nussmeier, tough game, LSU Clemson. I'm going to go the less on the passing yards. You can use this lineup or go ahead and make your own for this weekend. I'm telling you, it makes watching football games just that much more fun. Get started today with our friends over at PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app today. Use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Get started today with our friends at PrizePicks. Run your game. All right, so we will go on with the 53-man roster. Now, on the defensive side, let's look at the defensive tackles. Tim Settle, Mario Edwards Jr., Foley Futakasi, Sheldon Rankins, and Tommy Togai. Somebody who really surprised, really played well during all the preseason games, during training camp. DeMeco Ryans, the defensive staff, were really singing his praises. He looked really good. I wonder if they keep him on the roster or how they kind of manage things. Because, as I mentioned at the top of the video, DeMeco Autry on that IR/PUP list, I don't know how they maneuver it because I don't think they keep 11 guys on the defensive line on this roster, especially with help needed in the secondary. I wonder if some sort of move is made here with either Tommy Togai or somebody else because once DeMeco Autry comes back, I don't see them keeping 11 because 5 on defensive tackle. They also kept 5 defensive ends. They kept, obviously, Will Anderson Jr., Danielle Hunter, Derek Barnett, Darrell Taylor, and Dylan Horton, one out as that fifth defensive end. Kind of same thing as I mentioned. Danico Autry, will he push out Togai? Will he push out Dylan Horton? One of those two guys, I don't know if once he comes back, if both those guys are on the active roster. We'll have to see. Obviously, I'll break it down here on the channel if that does happen. But let me know. Name someone who shocked you by making the roster. Was it Graham Mertz? I think for me, it might be Graham Mertz. Let me know down in the comment section who's somebody who shocked you by making this 53-man roster. Somebody who shocked me, pleasantly surprising, was Jake Hansen. I didn't really give him that much of a shot in the linebacking room. The Texans ended up keeping 6 linebackers. Jamal Hill also could have been an answer to that as well. He played well, the second-year man out of Oregon. They obviously kept the top 4 guys, E.J. Speed, Christian Harris, Henry Toto, and Azeez Al-Shire to round out the linebacking room. I thought the Texans were going to keep 6 linebackers. DeMeco Ryans, a former linebacker himself. So no shock to me that the Texans ended up keeping 6 guys in that linebacking room. This is where the shock comes because in the secondary, very, very thin. They only keep 8 guys in the secondary, which, I mean, okay, but you're going to have guys playing multiple positions, moving around, and then also kind of making sure that these guys stay healthy. So cornerbacks, Derek Stingley, Kamari Lassiter, Jalen Smith, Tremon Smith. Those are your cornerbacks on this initial 53-man roster, and then they only keep 4 safeties on the roster. Jalen Petrie, Kalen Bullock, C.J. Gardner-Johnson, and M.J. Stewart. Those are the only 4 guys that they kept on the roster. We did get some more news around Jimmie Ward. As I mentioned, I didn't think that he would end up suiting up for the Texans at all this year. DeMeco Ryans has kind of been backing his guy. The Texans have been showing some sort of, middle of the fence / maybe a little leaning support Jimmie Ward's way, but he was officially put on the commissioner exempt list by the NFL, which means doesn't matter what DeMeco Ryans, Nick Caserio think. He is not allowed to play, practice, be around the team until the NFL, Roger Goodell, says so. So pending the investigation, pending his trial, pending, all the legal battles that he has off the field will depend on whenever he's able to come back to the Houston Texans, if he does at all this year. So just something to note, Jimmie Ward, not anything to do with the Texans. The actual NFL was the ones that put this hammer down, making sure he is not allowed around the Houston Texans. So let's finish off with the most obvious, the special teams, Kaimi Fairbairn, Tommy Townsend, and Austin Brinkman, who, thank God, Blake Ferguson was very rough in that last preseason game up against the Lions. So we get our long snapper back in Austin Brinkman. So all is good there. And as I mentioned, give me a follow on Twitter at Jeremy Chugs because I don't think the Texans roster is set whatsoever. I refuse to believe they go into week 1 up against the Rams with 2 tight ends and 8 defensive backs. That means there's going to be some shuffling. There's been a lot of trade rumors around Cam Robinson as well. I put out a video this morning. I'll put that in the comment section description of today's show if you didn't catch it. But Cam Robinson might get dealt, and other moves might be made. So that's why you got to hit that subscribe button. I'll break it down here on the channel. Whatever moves the Texans end up making around their roster, I will make sure to let y'all know about it. So if you made it to the end of today's video, make sure go down and hit that subscribe button.